Minister of Mines, Energy and Petroleum Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I am so absolutely pleased to be able to rise in support of the budget delivered just a couple weeks ago by the Minister of Finance. It is a wonderful budget that reflects so many of the values, so much of the need that I've seen, not just in the communities that I represent around the beautiful Kootenay Lake and the central Kootenays, but around all of British Columbia. And it's not surprising that after 16 years of neglect by the former BC Liberal government, that British Columbians were yearning for a government that was going to put their needs first and foremost, rather than the needs of their rich friends, Honourable Speaker. And what were those needs? Well, we have an affordable housing crisis in this province. It is at crisis levels. It's the #1 topic of conversation amongst my peer group. You go to any dinner party, any function at all, and what are we talking about? We're talking about housing prices. We're talking about rental prices. We're talking about how difficult it is to actually save up for down payments, Honourable Speaker. This is the topic of conversation for pretty much anybody under the age of 45. I used to say under 40, I used to say under 35, and as I age, I put that 5 years on a little bit at the end. But this is one of our #1 concerns. And then on top of that, Honourable Speaker, what are my friends talking about? What are the people that live in my constituency talking about? They're talking about access to childcare, access to affordable childcare. And they saw nothing for 16 years from the previous government. Pardon me, Honourable Speaker, they did see something. They saw cuts to childcare. I remember the rallies in my riding in 2001 and 2002 when after cuts to childcare were taking place, and families back then were concerned about how on earth they were going to make sure that they would be able to go to work, make sure that their kids would be taken care of in a quality, affordable environment, that they could trust the care that they were in. And of course, what happened as time progressed, wait lists grew, Honourable Speaker. People could not afford the cost of childcare, and they had to adjust. And that left a lot of people in what has grown to not just be an affordable housing crisis, Honourable Speaker, but an affordability crisis overall around the province. That is part of the 16-year legacy of the BC Liberals. So we've come in, and in less than a year, have addressed those very issues with this budget, Honourable Speaker. I just heard a comment about how we have 20 consultations underway. This government has. Let me take a moment just to address that, if I may, Honourable Speaker. The idea of talking to British Columbians being seen as a bad idea by the BC Liberals comes as no surprise to anybody in British Columbia, Honourable Speaker. If they had taken a moment in one of their last budgets to actually talk to people with disabilities, they would have known that taking bus passes away was one of the most ridiculous, poor, wrong, immoral decisions that they could have ever have made, Honourable Speaker. Talking to citizens is about democracy. So sorry you guys don't like that concept. We over here, Honourable Speaker, are proud to be consulting with British Columbians. We are proud to be engaging them in their democracy, and we are proud to be engaging them in government process, because at the end of the day, Honourable Speaker, this government belongs to British Columbians. And Honourable Speaker, and that's why British Columbians are thrilled with this budget. Not just in my riding, Honourable Speaker, I've been receiving tons of emails and correspondence, people stopping me in the streets back home, telling me how proud they are. When I called childcare advocates who have been advocating for universal childcare for decades. In fact, if we want to actually just acknowledge the history on advocacy around a universal childcare program, the first time that concept ever showed up in a government document was 1970. It was the Royal Commission on the Status of Women. It was a recommendation from that Royal Commission. 1970, Honourable Speaker, before I was even born, before my parents were even married, Honourable Speaker. The advocacy for that program started back in the 60s. 50 years later, British Columbians are going to see a universal child care program, Honourable Speaker, because of this budget and because of this government. I'm only sad that it took so long for that to happen, Honourable Speaker. But the housing, and I'm going to come back to childcare because there's so much good things to say about that, but I want to start acknowledging that the housing investment that this government is making is the largest in this province's history. We're going to build 34,000 units across the province. It's going to include mixed income social housing, new beds for students at colleges and universities, and I can tell you right now that for Selkirk College in the West Kootenays, that the demand for student housing has done nothing but increase year over year over year, Honourable Speaker. As we grow our international student population, Honourable Speaker, they are struggling to find housing in the community because they cannot get housing on campus. That we are making that type of investment is going to have such positive impacts for domestic, for Canadian students, as well as international students, Honourable Speaker. And we also have units dedicated for people who are homeless, who have been struggling and living on the streets, and who have been experiencing what can be some of the most roughest conditions in a lifetime. We are going to support them to move into housing because, Honourable Speaker, the best way to end homelessness is to provide housing. Honourable Speaker, of course, the issue around housing does not just start and end with new units. Of course, we need those. But of course, the issue around housing encompasses the demand side as well. And we know that part of the reason that we have an affordability crisis in this province is as a result of some of the speculation that has been going on with our housing market. People from other parts of the world have been, and not just other parts of the world actually, people here as well, but primarily people from other parts of the world have been dropping their wealth into housing here and driving up prices. Now, this doesn't just happen in the Lower Mainland, it happens throughout BC, particularly in most notable regions, and that's exactly why we're going to be extending the foreign buyers tax to the Fraser Valley, to the Central Okanagan, Nanaimo, and the Capital Regional Districts. And now this is very good for my community, even though it doesn't fall into this particular regional approach to the foreign buyers tax, because there's a ripple effect, Honourable Speaker. As prices increase in other parts of the province, people leave those parts. So people leave Vancouver, for example, and they look for more affordable places to live in other parts of BC. And Nelson is one of those communities that attracts a lot of people fleeing the expensive cost of housing in the Lower Mainland. And what that happens is it also drives up the cost of housing in our area. You have that ripple effect then affect Salmo, Caslow, as well as Creston, as well as even smaller communities like Meadow Creek, Honourable Speaker. This is the reality of how the affordable housing crisis that has its epicenter in Vancouver actually extends to everywhere else in the province. So recognizing that, Honourable Speaker, we are actually increasing the foreign buyers tax to 20%. And we are also going to be applying a tax that will be applied to property owners who don't pay income tax here in British Columbia, so that we are ensuring that housing in BC, first and foremost, is providing roofs over the heads of British Columbians, so that we can address the issue of the affordability, so that my peers when we're at dinner parties, and this isn't just in Nelson, I know this is in every community across British Columbia, so that when we're talking about what's affecting us most in life, which is those housing costs, we're actually able to talk about affording a house. We're actually able to talk about buying our first homes, making sure, Honourable Speaker, that we have the same opportunities as our parents had, Honourable Speaker, when it comes to being able to own our own asset, to own our own home. That is a dream that should not be out of reach of British Columbians, and certainly it will be less so out of reach because of this government's actions. And I also want to pay a quick note, though, Honourable Speaker, before I move on to another part of this wonderful budget, is that a lot of people in my community, seniors, young families, they've been struggling with that ever-increasing rent, and that's exactly why we have increased benefits to the RAP program so that low-income families will see their average payment increase by approximately $800 a year, and seniors who receive SAFER will see their average payment increase by more than $930 a year, Honourable Speaker. That's going to be very, very important for my region, particularly since when you look at some of the lowest income communities in BC, you're going to find them in Nelson Creston, Honourable Speaker. And so this is a very important budget and a very important lift for people in my riding. Honourable Speaker, I talked about childcare, and let me come back to it for just a moment, because like housing, this is another historic investment. This is another historic investment for BC. We are investing the largest number of dollars into childcare than any other government before us in British Columbia. And so what is that going to mean? Well, for 86,000 British Columbians, they're going to be eligible for our affordable childcare benefit, Honourable Speaker, and that's going to reduce childcare fees by $1,250 a month. So for a lot of people in my constituency, Honourable Speaker, they're not going to pay anything. They're not going to pay anything for their child care. And what the families I spoke to, the people who were part of the stroller brigade during the election, the families all around the region, is, well, their response, Honourable Speaker, was actually tears of joy. And when I called the advocates in my riding to let them know of their success of advocacy after decades, you could just hear the pin drop on the other end of the phone, Honourable Speaker. And they just were so elated. They were so happy. And so while I hear criticisms from the opposition, that is their job, and I appreciate them fulfilling that duty, in terms of the overall rating of this child care program, it's those types of reactions that tell me that we did the right thing, that this program and this budget is delivering exactly on the hopes and dreams of young families, of long-standing advocates, and that we are building something truly great, a true legacy for all British Columbians. Honourable Speaker, somebody just said a true in debt legacy. Actually, this budget is completely balanced. So I just want to take a moment to tell people watching at home, if you ever have a government that tells you that they can't afford social programs, they can't afford to put you first because they have to balance a budget, you tell them that they're wrong, because we did it. We balanced a budget and we put people first. Go figure, Honourable Speaker. It is possible. So, Honourable Speaker, I want to talk about some of the items that you'll find that show that our commitment to building the economy. So one of the things that was recently reported in November in the Mining Journal, it ranked BC at the top of the world for investment. It identified us as the least risky place to invest in mining. And it goes to show, Honourable Speaker, the new investments that we've seen in mining in just the last 6 months. Coeur Mining's purchase of JDS Silvertip, Centerra's purchase of Orico, Hudbay's investment in Amark, Vulcan in Orca Bay, Sand and Gravel, and Emvrim Resource Corp's recent agreement with Antofagasta on its BC properties. Honourable Speaker, investors from around the world, mining companies from around the world are ecstatic to be doing business in BC. And when they see a government who is committed to reducing their electricity costs by taking PST off hydro, saving them millions of dollars, when they see a government who wants to make sure that the mining flow through share tax program continues on so that we can ensure that we're growing that exploration, they see a government who's committed to that industry and seeing it thrive. And when they see a mining jobs task force, that we're going to be working with the industry and employers and employees and First Nations and local governments and post-secondary institutions, and this terrible thing that I hear from the BC Liberals of consulting with British Columbians, that we're actually going to engage them on how we can grow and make sure that this industry prospers. The mining industry is thrilled and they are excited to be working with this government, Honourable Speaker. I'm noting the hour, and as much as I would love to continue on, and I could easily do so past the time, Honourable Speaker, because this is such an amazing budget and there's so many wonderful things to say about it. I will defer to our standing orders that have us leaving here at 7 p.m. and I will reserve my place in the debate and move adjournment of the debate.